Nathan from Holdfast is going to be our first presentation. Welcome.
All right, yeah, so hi there. I'm just going to go ahead and start sharing my screen here. Let's see here. Can you guys all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm Nathan Churches from Holdfast Aquaculture. I am just going to go ahead and jump right into it. The first thing I'd like to do is put a face to the name. So Holdfast was started by 3 people. Kelly Stromberg, she's our Chief Operations Officer, and she's been in the sustainable seafood industry for about 15 years. And she is essentially the mussel guru, and that's a photo of her holding a bunch of baby mussels there. Diane Kim is the other co-founder, along with myself. She's a biological oceanographer. There she is in her dive gear. She works at the Wrigley Institute on Catalina as a day job. And she's our CEO. I'm Nathan Churches. I'm in the middle here, and I'm the Chief Science Officer. I got my PhD last year, and I focused heavily on genomics and genetics of selective breeding, specifically with a focus on how we can apply those techniques to aquaculture. I'm a professor as my day job at East LA College, and I run Holdfast primarily. So this is our obligatory garage photo here. This is what we started with, was 1 tank in the corner of a marine lab, and we've grown significantly since then. So some of the current products we offer are listed below here. So we really like to call ourselves a seed company. In the bottom left here, you can see mussel seed. In the middle 2 photos here, you can see some generation of kelp seed. So we do seaweed sales, and these are things that we sell directly to ocean farmers. In addition to this, we have some projects creating some value-added shelf-stable foods so that we can extend the shelf life of highly perishable seafood products like mussels. And we try to bring this to a high-end market. So one of these cans of mussels that we're working on here will probably run in the $7 to $10 per can range. So these are current products that we offer. I'm going to kind of start off with why we want to get into this industry and into this business in the first place. So we think in Southern California, the opportunity is expanding rapidly. And I'm going to give you 2 quick examples, but there are many more. The first example is Ventura Shellfish Enterprises. So they're located right outside of the Port of Ventura, or Ventura Harbor, I guess it's called. And VSE wants to put 20 100-acre farms into the waterway there. So that's an immediate 2,000-acre increase in the Southern California bivalve and seaweed industry footprint. Santa Barbara Mariculture, which is a photo of Bernard, who runs that operation right below here. They just got a 50-acre expansion, and this is sort of a one-man operation, 1 or 2, depending on the time of the year. But they went from 25 up to a total of 75 acres. So that's 2 concrete examples. There are many others that are sort of in the works, including Port of San Diego, Carlsbad, Catalina Sea Ranch may or may not come online, and a variety of others. So the industry is expanding in the tune of thousands of acres. There are boats available for this industry. Most of the wild catch fleet can be and should be adapted to do sustainable aquaculture as this industry grows, and they will need to. There are industry entities like Greenwave that can and specialize in training crew to work in these sort of specialized aquaculture open ocean environments. And they do have some West Coast operations right now. But what we don't have is local hatcheries producing Southern California adapted seeds. And that's where Holdfast comes in. So here's our skills and our assets. This is what we're bringing to the industry. In the top left here, you can see a lab that I built at USC. So this is at the Wrigley Institute on Catalina Island. This lab is still operational, and it just kind of gives you an idea about this sort of the science scale R&D efforts that I can put together, and that we're trying to translate into industry scale efforts. The top right corner shows a molecular lab that we still have access to. We have a less impressive molecular lab, but we still have one at our site. But we have full-scale research labs at our disposal. The bottom left photo here shows the long line, we dub it the long line, which is a research site that I permitted or helped permit. I installed it and ran it for several years. And essentially what this is it's a commercial mock-up where we can take a research idea, we can test it at research scale, put it in an open environment, and see if that pays out in terms of being amenable to industry. And then, of course, we take all these skills and we need to translate them into large industrial scale production. So this is a photo of Holdfast's industry site, less flashy perhaps, but functional. So here's some examples of R&D projects that we're pursuing, either hope to pursue or are actively pursuing. I'm going to start off with an economic example and sort of how Holdfast thinks about market potential and how we leverage our skill sets. So oyster farming in Southern California is also fairly nascent but ready to expand. And so for example, VSC, Ventura Shellfish Enterprises, if they dedicated that 2,000 acres entirely to oyster farming, the hatchery business, so the seed production business, could be in the range of around $12 to $20 million in profit for just the hatchery, the people that sell them the seeds to go out on the farms. And the difference in that profit margin has to do with essentially hatchery techniques and genomic application of genomic techniques. And so Holdfast has these genomic and genetic skills, and we can create state-of-the-science products that are considered non-GMO and can create those products for farmers, which are actually preferable and sort of increase our profitability and hopefully theirs at the same time. So that's an oyster project that we have in the works. We hope to get more funding from that from, I believe that one is the USDA. I'm going to go to a couple other projects and I'm going to explain them hopefully in about 30 seconds or less. This is a USDA SBIR that we're working on. What we want to do is bring the California mussel to Southern California marketplaces. So the project in a nutshell is that the California mussel is a native and delicious mussel, but we can't go harvest it from the wild. It would decimate the reefs. We actually did that in the 1800s and it's still recovering, the populations are. But they do settle on long lines in the open environment naturally. And when they do that, they actually produce a gorgeous product. So you can actually see one of these here. And it's actually, in my opinion, prettier than what's available on the market currently. The missing link in this sort of story is, can we produce it in a hatchery? Can we close that life cycle? And the USDA has given us money to look into this, and we'll be applying for phase 2 funding for this for next year. This sort of highlights a completely different aspect, but an equally important goal to Holdfast, which is to educate public and especially K through 12 groups. So we've put together, in collaboration with a bunch of people on the left here, an NSF ISLE proposal where we would essentially increase the informal STEM opportunities at the California Science Center and the Cabrillo Marine Aquarium. And Holdfast in this project would help deploy and operate a public-facing demonstration farm. And so that kids and the general public can get hands-on learning to actually have real concrete examples of what climate change looks like and what sustainable seafoods in the future would look like. Of course, this comes with infrastructure improvements, and we'll be collaborating with the School of Public Policy on best educational approaches so that you know, the kids and the public retain some of the knowledge that they gain there. Okay, so Holdfast summary in 3 parts. The bivalve and seaweed industry is poised for expansion in Southern California. Holdfast is positioned to provide the entire Pacific Southwest industry with seeds and products, and that includes bivalves and seaweed seeds. And Holdfast has a track record of collaborative R&D with commercial, academic, and educational outcomes. So I only had a chance to go into a couple of small projects, but there are many more that we could discuss. And so with that, I will open it up to Q&A, and I'll put on the contact information here.
All right. Thank you, Nathan. While Q&A is coming through, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Are you currently going through a round of funding outside of the undiluted that is through the grants and SBIR?
So right now we're not actively going for funding outside of grants. We have some friends and family funds that are adequate, but we'd be interested obviously in pursuing a good opportunity if it came our way.
And what would your runway be for that? Do you know? Do you worked that out?
Timeline wise, is that what you're?
Well, both timeline and then and if you would have if you have funding, would that extend your runway to do other projects or commercialize faster? Whatever you tell me.
Yeah, well, I'd say that our biggest crux right now is well, it's twofold. One is footprint, right? So Alta-C was a great opportunity for us, and we hope to get back into Alta-C. But as a lot of people may or may not know, that footprint shrunk, and so we're right now operating in a footprint that's about 1/10 the size that we prefer to be in. So we're sort of actively shopping and keeping our ears open for opportunities to expand just in terms of industrial footprint. And then I guess the other component would be being able to help some of our potential customers along with permitting in terms of just the actual paperwork of permitting, but also employing whatever equipment and deploying whatever equipment they might need at a site. So like I said, the industry is ready to expand, and I think there are many concrete examples of how that is going to happen, but we're still somewhat short on the number of customers that we prefer. So that's why we're not necessarily rigorously seeking outside funding at the moment, because we want that business model to develop a little further.
Okay. And what's the state of permitting in California, and how is that affecting your business?
The state of permitting is essentially why the business is in startup phase still. I mean, I should mention that we started essentially in 2019, and we've done a ton in this space in that amount of time, but we'd be much further along if, for example, Ventura Shellfish Enterprises had some sort of streamlined platform where they could apply for permitting. The reality is that they're essentially the guinea pigs for putting these types of large-scale renter leasee systems out into the ocean. So because of that, it takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of regulatory red tape, and yeah, it's really slowing the industry down. That's not necessarily to say that that's anybody's fault. It's just the
state of the play, right?
The state of the play.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you know, I'm pro being careful about it. There are great examples of how not to do aquaculture in other parts of the world, and so I can appreciate where regulators are coming from. Yeah.
So so related to that, then how does that compare to permitting elsewhere? Could you effectively take this to a different location and repeat it there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of our more exciting avenues for the future would be to go and do similar projects in Mexico. I mean, a lot of people in this industry are already doing that and are looking to expand in that direction. That would be interesting to us. That comes with its own set of hurdles in terms of import-export permits, but right now we prefer to stay in LA to do this, on our turf right now. But the reality is that that's potentially a more economical business model in the immediate future.
Okay, excellent. Have another question here.
Sure.
More around your immediate needs and what other additional things you need to proceed further into the commercialization aspect, and also about your corporate structure.
So immediate needs are essentially, like I discussed, a footprint. We are right now producing I would say 1/5 of the content that we want to in terms of product. And that is really constrained by how much algae we can produce in order to feed a certain number of hungry animals, right? Mm-hmm. So right now on our site, we have about 1,000 feet of line that we're sending to a mussel farmer, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But we have the tank space for essentially twice that, if not 3 times that. And that would provide, for example, let's say 2 to 3 farmers their entire seed needs for the year if we had a bigger algae grow operation. And that's just constrained by footprint. So that's part of it. And then the other part, corporate structure, it's essentially us three. Us three and a family member own the company. We are essentially split evenly across that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have another question. Any thoughts of using engineering algae to vaccinate? Would that work with mollusks?
To vaccinate against what, for example?
Don't know. I have any specificity on that.
Okay, well, I mean, so one of the big things in the shellfish world, especially, would be these windows where you can't harvest due to red tides or toxic algal blooms. That's an active area of research. I think one interesting area, and I've actually published some work. I actually happen to have this paper in front of me. I didn't actually mean to do this. This is kind of, I've been taking notes on the back, but I published this paper here regarding fecal microbiomes of oysters, right? This is some of my academic work. You guys can go check it out if you'd like. But what I'd be interested in doing from the sort of bioengineering aspect would be to produce gut microbiomes or inoculants that you could put into a farm or into a hatchery setting that could either increase resiliency or tolerance to disease, but in the case of toxic algal blooms, decrease the sort of retention rate of some of those toxic compounds.
So I did get an answer. It was viruses like spot virus in shrimp. That was the follow up on that
Right.
question.
So one of the big thing in shellfish is a herpes virus in oysters. And to be completely transparent, I haven't done that much work on virology of oysters, but that is something that needs to be solved for this industry. And speaking of permitting hurdles, that's one of the reasons why oyster farming hasn't taken hold here, is because we're more prone to those types of diseases. So I'd be very interested to sort of get on a bioengineering project that could look at solving that problem.
And microbiomes and stuff like that. So back related to permitting, what are the regulatory agencies that oversee that? And this can be our last question too, actually, because we've got to move on.
Sure. So Fish and Wildlife is the primary one that I talk to when I'm talking about moving animals from either spot to spot or through state lines. But when we're talking about the general permitting processes that are that we need to be familiar with as aquaculturalists, we're talking Army Corps of Engineers, NOAA, Coast Guard, California Coastal is a big one, as well as more localized agencies, and it just depends on the site at that point.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Nathan.
Yeah.
And
thank you, guys.
if you would kindly